This is really the point it gets interesting now.
It does get interesting now, because now what happens, right? Because there's a Hong Kong court order for the liquidation from the Hong Kong court yesterday. Will that court order be followed in the mainland, where there's a different legal system, obviously, which obviously it takes direction essentially from the Communist Party. So if there's a dispersal of these assets, is it going to happen in China, right? Because essentially there's no precedence for a large company like this with a spaghetti bowl of different assets and liabilities and priorities and international bondholders and different kinds of creditors. Who's going to be left with, you know, the lion's share, and who's not going to necessarily come out of this very happily? And will it undermine, essentially, because look, the bonds and the shares are traded here in Hong Kong, but the bulk of those assets, $242 billion of assets, are located on the mainland. So how does this get divvied up in a liquidation that is ordered in Hong Kong? So it's a very complicated process, because generally speaking, this doesn't happen in China, an outright liquidation. It's something called an open disposal, where there will be essentially debt restructurings going on behind the scenes while the company will continue to operate, albeit maybe on a restricted basis. HNA Group is one example, that big sprawling company that got into many different businesses, but mainly, you know, Hainan Airlines and Hong Kong Airlines and the like. That process took 4 years, and it was a bit messy as well. There was criminal proceedings and the like. That's probably the closest analogy that we can get. But Evergrande, who knows how long this potentially can take. We're already seeing He Lifeng, the economic czar in China. He had a meeting. He basically calling on all the municipalities, the cities across China to follow the central government's orders to pretty much return discipline and follow through on central government policies to clean up the property mess, because the property mess is leading to the stock market mess. It's leading to a lack of confidence in China overall. So again, there's lots of issues to talk about, Annabelle, because one thing you think about if this is going to be contagion to others, and whether there's not going to be any white knight coming in, meaning Beijing coming in to rescue any of these insolvent developers, you have to look at things like pre-sales that are in escrow right now. And He Lifeng mentioned this. Those pre-sales, which a lot of these developers needed for financing and then dispersal into other higher yielding assets or investments, you know, he's warning city governments, you watch those pre-sales that are sitting in escrow in case they are dispersed elsewhere, if you know what I mean. So basically raiding the cookie jar while authorities are trying to figure out how to unwind what was one of the largest developers in China.
Yeah, so I know this is a tricky one, but what kind of timing are we talking about for this unwinding? And when it happens, is it going to be like we usually see with an unwinding and a liquidation? Are the usual people going to be at the front of the queue this time?
Well, everyone's going to be putting their hand out and saying, what about me? Obviously, we saw that as well, you know, with the coupon payments over this whole process. Dollar bondholders, let's face it, we're probably getting the short end of the stick here. So, again, it's all going to depend on if mainland courts back up what the Hong Kong court did yesterday. And that's, you know, how long is a piece of string? I oftentimes use that analogy because we simply don't know how long this is going to take and whether there's going to be compliance to that Hong Kong court order in mainland courts and those mainland assets. It really, we can't tell. Eric Ju, he'll be on later on, Bloomberg Economics. He thinks it could be 1 to 2, 3 year process. I mentioned to Annabelle, HNA process took about 4 years to unwind and essentially be restructured into what it is today. Again, it's going to be a long process, definitely.